Sangye
Chodam
chodam
Tsogi
tsogi
Chonam
chonam
La
la
Chanchu
chanchu
Badu
badu
Dami
dami
Kyapsu
kyapsu
Chi
chi
Dagi
dagi
Chishigi
chishi
Betonangi Drola
drola
Benshi
benshi
Sangye
sangye
Drupara
drupara
Sho
sho Sangye
Chodam
chodam
Tsogi
tsogi
Chonam
chonam
La
la
Chanchu
chanchu
Badu
badu
Dami
dami
Kyapsu
kyapsu
Chi
chi
Dagi
dagi
Chishi
chishi
Betonangi
betonangi
Drola
drola
Benshi
benshi
Sangye
sangye
Drupara
drupara
Sho
sho Sangye
Chodam
chodam
Tsogi
tsogi
Chonam
chonam
La
la
Chanchu
chanchu
Badu
badu
Dami
dami
Kyapsu
kyapsu
Chi
chi
Dagi
dagi
Chishigi
chishi
Betonangi
betonangi
Drola
drola
Benshi
benshi
Sangye
sangye
Drupara
drupara
Sho
sho Kangi tozi ni zuni tawa tamche pambi chere tambi chulu tenzi kodam kela chanze lu. Good afternoon, good evening, good evening everyone. Sorry. So chhod ki yura.
Ani Dechina Chidu.
Yeah.
I guess I was wondering if you have any questions or doubts. So I said that Dechinlav has a question, right?
I do. That one of the, I'd be interested to know.
If, sorry.
What did you say?
If, yeah, I'd be interested to know if.
Yes, or what?
Or what?
To know what technique or techniques that Geshe finds the best for him in practicing compassion. I'd be interested to know what techniques that he favors.
That the ninja gomtan sto, kan genge no tsuto ne ninja kiatang tab deshu karina.
Tanyamni yomaras.
Well, I guess I said that his doesn't have like an advanced practice of compassion.
He doesn't have any.
An advanced practice of compassion.
Je
Well, it's kind of, it's like, yeah, it's a very, if you ask the Tibetan about the practice, they will tell you they're not practicing. So that's the cultural context.
Oh, that's the thing.
Yeah.
ninji ninji tsachim tsigis ra. Ninji pe tsachim tsigis. Tangi penangi ge the khartya mai ya. Ninji ti kichi shuch gradas. Penangi ta tangi chunju chigores. Tangi matakwa ni chunju pugores. Chunju pusa di zo di ta ngarangi chigora ta. Gomu chadruwa di tadila di kezari gomu chadruwa di ta chujung zo chigores. Ani gomu chadruwa di ninji chadu chubi rachi chagonza ni chunju kadu pina ya ni zo di ani ni gyula ya ninji ya kiya ya an totally naro cheese ni zo di shuya semnam tamjari ni tiyus ro.
But still, Geshe can say that in his mind, compassion is of the most important things that we should cultivate in our spiritual practice. Particularly when you look at different practices that we do, different rituals that we recite, or other things that we take into our practice, compassion constitutes one of the main principles of all of those different practices. So it's a great commonality of those practices. Like, for example, Geshe says that, at least on a personal level, looking at the things that he does daily, one of them is a protective practice for 6 arms Mahakala. 6 arms Mahakala is a wrathful manifestation of compassion. So, at least in this practice, Geshe's supplication, aspiration is for the development of compassion in his mind.
Tijiris, tandangi tandikawe yangi zo ta yawakundi rimshu sanamudu pawan jigdewan chuki namtar logo yanza tinang logo yangi tiri kharjas islami Geshe lan thamba gi kutsi khambo le ya gemot sarchik shores timado gemo shonyu yomares don sherele yanzum penyo yomares sarchik di ta gishilan tamba chadrawaro kan yomaro ta isi shiram kongi simjala ya kuma yonchi kuma tape kasagate on kiki yomaro ke maradi ta logic era ankon shemon shores
Loki?
pa lodu da
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
ani gishila shemon shores timado gishila kuzi kambola yakpe ani chi simjeng ki nanzu chadam mosong ki shemon ki teni kowa da kichin ki ani simjang tamji ki dungarti samchin ta ninji ki onki kanji shere kawo shikyun tenyu yomarsa
Geshe told us a few days ago in the advanced study program that he's reading through a series of books that he got from a library concerning the Lord of the World, which is one of the names of Chenrezig, an epithet of Chenrezig. So there are quite a lot of stories and anecdotes that draw from the Indian tradition and as well as some Tibetan masters in that book. And in the reading that Geshe had today of a few pages from this book, there was an account of Geshe Langritapa, who was said to be quite serious for most of his life. He says that he smiled only once in his life. So it didn't have like a cheerful bearing. It was quite serious and severe on most of his life. He smiled only one time. And this occasion that brought up a smile in his face was that he lived as a hermit. So he had nothing. One day, a thief came into his house hoping to score some rewards, but he saw that there was nothing in Geshe Langitampa's place. After all, he was living as a hermit, so he went away empty-handed. So that gave him a chuckle, right? So Geshe Langitapa had a smile. That was the only time that he smiled. For he said that his main practice was compassion. And he was considering the way in which sentient beings of the 6 realms of existence, being under the control of karma and afflictive states of mind, undergo a variety of suffering. And through that, he nourished compassion, or he cultivated compassion. So as he was considering the myriad ways in which sentient beings were beset by suffering, he didn't find that situation cheerful at all.
Tere dinza the kirang chodi ani ngi pawan chi de wan chu ta chi nam tel lo chi ka dinza dinama la ta chi chere six na zo ninji ro ta ninji ki dang ko pe ya ti sung dos and di chi ri ni ni ta na ninji kom dang ya ma bu song yo res ni ya zu ti ta da lam zu na lo ya jang go nam chung ga chi bi lamzu nalo ya chanju sen ketan son yas ta di yaxshi di chagwa sarsam dus ra
So that's one point, since you asked Geshe about things that he takes into his practice in order to cultivate compassion. So as I said, as he's reading nowadays from the Lord of the World, this account of Chenrezig. Chenrezig is the embodiment of compassion, right? It represents the aspect of compassion. So that's one point. Another point is to draw from Lama Tsongkhapa's 3 principal aspects of the path. There is a section in which Lama Tsongkhapa teaches the way to develop bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. And that also has a particular way of teaching it. So that's the second thing that Geshe wanted to bring up.
Shudra Choshi Junkin Kill, Dogan Legin, Chima Tambe Tam, Danzin Chagi Tavi Bosu, Mari Mundi, Manchin Kunit, Memesi Vacation, Kiva, Dumasum, Pinchim, Nar, Suk Samchini, and Sinjali, Injikin, the Chanjus and Kidangeras. The Yakshut, the Lola Tishut. The sound down that Susu Nyamyoras been Chadang Kandayome, and it Chadang Shima Juchin, kowa kiwanendan dianko pigi chikpa rigbe 대야진도 왔으라 rigbe lamne ba 대진 대치 온디 안 딘지 ngansul 상온디 야세 야탐바니 닌지 kiwe bachik ro 딘지 다 디악슈인 사레스라.
So in Lama Tsongkhapa's three principal aspects of the path, in the section that explains the way to generate bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, it is found in this book in page 255. It says, swept away by the currents of the four powerful rivers, tied by the tight bonds of karma so hard to undo, caught in the eye net of self-grasping, completely enveloped by the total darkness of ignorance, endlessly reborn in cyclic existence, ceaselessly tormented by the three sufferings. Thinking that all mothers are in such a condition, generate the supreme mind of enlightenment. So this section comes under the heading of generating bodhicitta, but when you look at the wordings, then it speaks about the way that you cultivate compassion, first of all, compassion for sentient beings who are swept away by the currents of the four powerful rivers. They are tied by the tight bonds of karma so hard to undo. They are caught in the iron net of self-grasping and so forth. So you can use that as a foundation for first off developing compassion. And Lama Tsongkhapa explains that in a kind of really particular or specific way. So when you draw upon the meaning of these words, you can first of all think with respect to yourself, you can appreciate or evaluate how you yourself are tormented by anger and attachment. We can assess that based upon a personal experience, the effect or the experience of being under the sway of anger and attachment. And then when you take that on and that explanation, and then you start to think about it in terms of logic, in how through that you take repeatedly birth in cyclic existence, then Geshe feels that you have something quite special to work with in terms of your development of compassion for sentient beings. How through being under the control of such afflictive states of mind, again and again they are born in samsara, and then again and again they undergo a variety of suffering.
Nenga chikpare das ro te di chidanda bena gyunde menga dung ko ni lo chanchu te ya hu lei shuros te yinaya chikta so ya lo le teme te do yungudas te jidi gi da bena ngal ro ni te nyinji nyamne mena ya dindi gi pi lo chanchu ti ani semla ni karsota bhabche ro susu lo le ya.
So we can use that. Then there is the practice of the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions, and also the practice of equalizing and exchanging self with others, which are getting at the same point of developing compassion for sentient beings. Now, in terms of those practices, Geshe feels that equalizing and exchanging self with others for him creates a spaciousness of mind, and it works well for him. So although he does not pretend to be a practitioner of compassion, still in terms of using techniques for engendering compassion for sentient beings, he finds that on a personal level, that using the meditation instructions on equalizing and exchanging self with others does bring about that spaciousness of mind, a mind that is more vast and extensive, in which there is a better ability for compassion to arise.
When the Jangalong Sunga Chimbi, Chitan Lamrum Chindi Chunsun Namaya, Lojam Samason Yordania. So the Jangalong Sunga Chimbi, the Chik Nyamne Ninji Nyamne, so the Dajin Yamji go the Chimetro Samsung, Narandinji Kombalang years, then the Gombar of Sayina, so the any Dajin Yamji, the Omanjuban Somanashin, Omanjubi Devadilla, Omanjuba Somanashin. And the Pandan Dawa Travia, Ninji Ketandi, so Daziniam Julia, Jan Sungas.
Looking at the writings of Lama Tsongkhapa, he composed, for example, different extents of an explanation of the states of the path of enlightenment. The Lamrim Chemo, the great exposition on the states of the path of enlightenment, the medium one and the abridged one. And although in those texts he explained both systems, Geshe feels that when you think of what Lama Tsongkhapa put into practice, Geshe reckons that it was a that Lama Tsongkhapa was a practitioner of equalizing and exchanging self with others. For when you look at other texts that Lama Tsongkhapa composed, such as, for example, The Illumination of the Thought as a commentary to Chandrakirti's supplement to the Middle Way. Also in The Illumination of the Thought, Lama Tsongkhapa drew from equalizing and exchanging self with others, which we keep in mind that is a commentary to Chandrakirti's text, a supplement to the Middle Way, which also implies that Chandrakirti himself, and this is also what is said about Chandrakirti, so the glorious Chandrakirti himself was a practitioner of equalizing and exchanging self with others.
Je ani gombolo ge jin tame na song de so di the dajin yang ji ko no jang de sung do sra.
Also, Nagarjuna in his precious garland taught equalizing and exchanging self with others.
Tinzda kanji suzulo la kantiabat. Pi keu tambo su ta lo jandang rimba kan yobati nanzula ya lamde na shayore. And di any suzu di nyams nenchine kari lo tebati ti ton drawina le la yigiras mother chitangi and yiji ke le la usage tayomarasra.
But still, we need to keep in mind that there are different techniques that we're taught because we are different individuals and things work differently to us on a mental level. So although Geshe expressed his view with respect to equalizing and exchanging self with others, it doesn't mean that this will necessarily work in the same way for us. So we do need to give it a try and to see which techniques works for us. So we want to develop compassion. It is an important aspect to develop in our practice, but then we still need to find the approach that suits us the most.
Tinzadela gunzen samdaya, gunzen mang samdaya dos. That you social samba, gunzen mang samdaya. Gunzen menga dungikon, that you know Simja Tamje Mashiva said, Chidan the shoe lab was in a Kasata Chambudo Shavana. And Simja Tamje Mari said, Soba Cherenos, Soba Chichin, that did Soba Jing Tony, that big Mayima Dushisha, and Tinika Dinchim concept, this chick Kasota Shambana Shedoj, the Narangolata, Tindiroji Shargoras.
So we mentioned equalizing and exchanging self with others. The other practice that we mentioned is the sevenfold cause and effect personal instructions for developing bodhicitta. So we're using 6 steps, and as a result of them, the 7th step is bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. So it begins with the first step, recognizing all sentient beings as having been our mothers. So there is a reason that we use in order to cultivate the apprehension that all sentient beings have been our mothers. And yet, in some sense, you can say that it is an educated guess. So we go through that meditation, we apply the first step of the meditation, but it's a sort of, currently it's still at the level of having a sense of assessment or educated guess with respect to sentient beings having been our mothers. So that being the case, when you approach that on that level, that you make that assessment to guess that they have been my mother, and then you continue with thinking that they've been kind to me and develop the wish to repay the kindness, you do that, but still, from the point of view of finding which system works better for your mind, Geshe feels that the other system at least have more to work with, in that it's not just kind of starting with that assessment or educated guess that sentient beings have been my mothers before, and therefore this is what I need to think about them.
Chagdangi Maribi Ongi, Chagdangi Ongi Lesa, and leave it to the Kiwan engine, and do Sukorjin, that do not part of my young daddy. Some which you come in that one time Ratre Yuchik, Tiredos, Dinti Yata, then Niji Kiwana, Niji Kiwabach, Chagdos, Ra.
So then if you turn to the other system and you think of how sentient beings are under the control of karma and afflictions, they are under the control of anger and attachment and so forth. And due to that, they perform actions that result in suffering, then this Geshe feels that this reasoning that also recognizes the equality of all sentient beings, us being under the control of afflictions, performing actions that result in suffering, it is a correct and faultless process of reasoning, isn't it?
Tida tandangi shio nazi Gislam tambagi karsuda mashi tinjigi toni any ninji gom maybe sources ra dashi nyamji pugigi any maribitoji chadangi lesa leyongi any koala ya any kordek dindich sichin any ninji gom yibi the namdana dinero sigdusra.
So then in looking at the biography of Geshe Langri-Tangpa, Geshe reckons that it almost implies, or this is at least when you read through the narratives, it seems that Geshe Langri-Tangpa was not a practitioner of this practice that begins with recognizing all sentient beings as having been your mothers, then becoming mindful of the kindness of sentient beings. Rather than practicing that, he practiced equalizing, exchanging self with others in, first of all, recognizing how sentient beings are under the control of ignorance. And because of the control of ignorance, anger and attachment arise that cause us to perform actions that perpetuate our suffering. And it seems that in that biography, it emphasizes the way that Geshe Langri-Tangpa was cultivating compassion to sentient beings.
Tisangazu kaptulaya jala suzulaya magangi chikarata pi conversation suzukan shoryongi telaya kaptu ninji gongo chongena ko pi kontru shawan dikyoni tako ani tabkyu shu chadu samsung sam tamaina kaptu getu saras ko ngi mare samsung samadi kenzaru jidasra ngala kenzaru jidasra suzuga chida nyamne mebi tagro darwata.
So then when you apply those practices in immediate situations, when, for example, you encounter someone that treats you in a rough way, with anger, then you can think that the person is in a pitiful situation. They're in a pitiful situation because they are under the control of anger and the like. So you develop compassion towards a person in that situation. It works quite well in a direct interaction with a person. Geshe feels that it works better, at least for him, in thinking that that person has been my mother, and therefore I should think about them in that way. So when you kind of encounter someone that has this rough attitude towards you, and you think that that person has been my mother, it says that at least starting with that initial thought doesn't directly help or immediately help that situation. But anyway, Geshe says that this is how it works for him.
Diza da pigilaya kaptu musu tonya digi ninji kiyaki kenche tuyadi ko kontro shuj lansh sambi samlo di yabaina ko kontro shawat kyeshe sambi samlo digi ani ninji kiyaki musu kenche yungu dasra.
So now when you think of a direct approach to the cultivation of compassion, when you encounter someone that is under the control of anger, for example, you could think that they are in a pitiful situation. In Tibetan, you say ninja, like compassion for the person, meaning that they have no control. They are under the control of other things, such as anger. Therefore, they have no freedom.
Excellent.
So is that okay?
Oh, yeah, it's great. The very first one that he gave was the praise of six
Mahakala.
the Mahakala, which we do every evening, 3 times, both parts, as Geshe asked us to. And I love the protectors, but it's from my side, it's just blind faith. I love the ritual and the wrathfulness of it all. I really like it. So, could you explain it a bit more?
Mm-hmm.
Please.
Honzo nima takbar gombo chatu ba dungar ba temasum krankare sumbanashin temasum den dungorwa then dungayan jewo dunayan de pegagi dosa ine tamboshena monde to ne chedegi yosa kansana gonzo pige to ne then the dundegi do shidapu gotsum do sti kran gombo chatu bagi toba di Geshe gap to wainas
je tanda monde sedi lab gom gutta giras ra ni monde chigi sedi chi so shu chi pi pa shom yak solo chi chegwe mo das ngonzo teba chese gi yu ngo jile ya an teba cheba di teba che yo ba chi gras di monde le shagwa ni sam di monde le shagwa mundus ra penanganzo ta chi pi shindong la sobare and ji tinjile ya and manche pi la soba ta dile yi chi teba chejura ta ding one monde ra ti pendo yo marada te nguma songdan pendo yo marwas tinji kyan sogi ani pyoge tone teya ani ngazu chigro ngazu phebagi ani 생각 참을로 안 레지 깨ton 된거레스 니나야 니도 상당히 걔는저 배우겠다면 난신기 난저 레지 깨tor야 테다오르 된거스레스 만책 레지 다고 슈지 메요 아 콘지 배우겠던 디티리저레다 디리저 식바 인사레스 이네 이시 여바나 질러든 주고서라스.
So first of all, Deshina, you said that you're doing it with blind faith. And Geshe says that you don't have to kind of underestimate the practice, even if you do it with that kind of faith. Because sometimes when you say, if someone says that they're doing it with blind faith, it seems that they haven't got a lot of confidence in themselves. So if you have faith in such a practice, it is faith. You don't have to underestimate that. That's very good. That's faith. Also, Geshe says that we do other recitations. We do recitations of different mantras, for example. And the mantras are, in Tibetan, they are denoted in the way that you should say them in Sanskrit. But since, over the years, the way of pronouncing them has changed. Now, in Tibetan language, they mostly recite a corrupt version of those mantras. So sometimes we do practices together and Geshe listens to the way that we recite those mantras, in the sense that to some degree we have a version of the way that they should be said in Sanskrit. Also depends, when you listen to the bands reciting them, it sounds sometimes quite different because they have their own version of saying it in Sanskrit. So sometimes when you listen to that and you see that there is a gap. But still, if you do it with a sense of faith, you shouldn't underestimate your recitation, regardless of how close or far it is from the original Sanskrit. If you do it with that sense of faith and trust in that, that's going to cut it.
Je tanda mungde sedi, mungba sedi, mungbi wangi teba sedi, mungba di sem mungba la jagores. Sem mungba di sem shinju lojres. Ra, sem shinju loj. Tinza pi tebi yu mahimba jilya, tebi yun zinchine, and di just ranchine, teba chingidilya, mundes and dindijil lagores.
Sorry, I left out something. Geshe says that, when you think of blind faith, you might do a recitation of this prayer and you might not have a lot of understanding of that, but it's still faith. It's better than having faith in other things. Like, for example, in some other traditions, you find that people have faith in practices that involve animal sacrifice, sacrificing blood, or worshipping trees, or what have you. So you could say that although your involvement with such practices is involved with that kind of faith, it's still faith. Now, the term itself, blind faith in Tibetan, is monde, right? So consisting of two syllables, mong and de. That means faith, and mong can mean confusion. But since the word confusion in Tibetan has a variety of meanings, one of them, Geshe says, is a distortion of reality, which means that because you have a misunderstanding of reality or an utter distortion of reality, you have, sorry, not sins, on the basis of having a distortion of reality or misunderstanding of reality, you trust something or you have faith in something to be in a particular way.
Teni dangi gombo chadu bangi kena god thangbola ya homan yunze mirwa bigi ta chik chilish miu shuji gi and cheris tele ya chasas. Teni diri tima do lamnos. Tago mare.
No.
Teni ngaji nimachili ya chik gendo ba sama rusa chila ni chik lab chores.
But anyway, since you also asked Geshe to explain the meaning of this protective practice, Geshe feels that it might not be suitable to explain it like that in public teaching given to everyone. So it begins with, basically it's a praise for six arms Mahakala, referring to Mahakala as a wrathful emanation of compassion and calling upon him to swiftly enact his enlightened activities. So Geshe promises to give an explanation of this verse to those of us who do the practice, but it will be more kind of maybe to a closer group or a smaller group rather than doing it for everyone.
Lisa.
Yes.
Ani terdangan zugi number 2 ta gonda tengoras. Gonda ten tengoras ra chenju ten. Ne ngashogi tengis. Kansana zu parche doya chet. Ta parche doya chetras. Parche la mambu yorata. Onje tsendi chik ani benjo longchula ya parche mangu ya. Samu tiji tengi yore ani 여 치마나우스 parche an tawada tamje keba toya pardu chibi parche doya kaga mingna digdas ra tichidi ti parche di kadus ni ngene dentu waina ra ngau dentu waina yaga bejumendes bena shoge kanden di chanzang sawaina ani nima kansa gi di gezati yungros ra inji konda gugde koyamendas.
Now we do this protective practice in the evening. Geshe does it in the morning. He does the protective practice in the morning. And the way that he thinks about it is that you do the protective practice as a practice that is involved with overcoming some obstacles or hindrances. So, and we encounter different obstacles, hindrances, and so forth. We have obstacles in this life. We have obstacles in terms of future lives, obstacles for liberation, obstacles for enlightenment. We face different types of obstacles. So then Geshe says that at least the way that he approaches that, he does this prayer in the morning, because the thing that if you do something in the morning, then the roots of virtue that you cultivate in the morning carry along with you as you do different things throughout the day. So therefore he thinks that since you do it in the morning, then it will also, this roots of virtue will also have an effect later on during the day. So no, we do it in the evening, but Geshe chooses to do it in the morning.
Otirita and shogi yalang the samlo the stang ani temi penangi londi nalola peshe manche chime tangi ro shogi indi che ani pe chadam yuji ani ngati lamus zobrums de pen paperu de konjanga chanju pyesa chikteso indi namala ya ani chanju pyu ani chinjute manam diskya anti chedegis kanji kiwdo sozula chik sosamle chik pengi namada yungudasra de chik ani chik pengudo sanme suena gaoyorasra.
So at least this year Geshe has been doing it continuously in the morning. He thinks that probably hasn't missed even one day of practice of 6 arms Mahakala. So then he wakes up in the morning, goes and boils some water for tea, put on the kettle, make tea. When Namso Rinpoche was here, Chimrezi Institute, Geshe got a present, a nice teacup. So he pours the tea into that and he makes a brief or short protective practice. This is how it begins the day.
And it takes on it.
Is it all right?
Yeah, no, that's lovely. That's beautiful. Can I ask another question?
Is it okay?
Yes, I'm okay. You okay?
I'm all right. I'm 80% all right.
Is that, you know, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to hear you teach on this and talk about this. That I've always struggled with this equalizing self with others. And you know, the comment that Geshe made, that he finds this brings about for him, it brings about a spacious mind. Equalizing self with others. Yeah, differentiating that from Tong Len. I get a bit confused.
All right. So, yeah, so I guess the question is kind of, you know, with equalizing self with others, Geshe spoke about how it creates in his mind this spacious state of mind. And you said that you find it a little bit confusing of that and Tonglen practice.
I'm interested to know how he does that, where is the spaciousness, where he finds the spaciousness within that practice. And then the second one, if there's an opportunity, difference between equalizing self with others and Tonglen.
All right. So the Peshenengan Niyasa, Chick Kuran Dashin Yamjesa, the Dashin Yambasa, the Quran, then the Quran that says Damindosa, collect Gon collect which igresa. Chazan Chiva Tambo di Kanres and the Quran di Gombaina, Sambaina, this Kuyamba, then the Chagres and the Soimba. Chazan Kuyambo Jetan di Kandechinas. Chiva Tambo dire. Chia Nimba Dila di Dashin Yamba. Tan Tonleng Gomtan di la Keba Tanjewa Kane Kanechi mean Kolasebo Mendoza.
저 당부디 고향 부처당 가르스. 라. तदी नजु पुस्तक उछागे दो संजामे semba maki bacha semba koto bacha ani chi mele tuna ya tunye matro yo gejeshen shenye matro kaji pusto bacha ani sengom gu naza yedenge mambuchi yongo do asra the di zo di kasna pi danning chi yensam ro de shukchim bu yobaina ani semdi pusto bu yongo yosares ro.
Let's begin with the first question. How can you use that in order to create a mind that is more spacious or more relaxed, more at ease? Well, Geshe says that often we experience problems because the mind is uptight. When it is uptight, narrow or uptight, we become naturally unhappy. Not only unhappy, but also we tend to stick to ourselves. When the mind is uptight, then we find it difficult to relate to others. So we want to stay away from others. We prefer not to talk to others. So in that sense, we create this isolation of ourselves. We isolate ourselves because we are uptight. Not only that, also, we sometimes speak about mental illness, different types of mental illness. And Geshe feels that there are types of mental illness in which you're made uptight. Your mind is made uptight. And you're less prone to interact with others. You know, you don't want to talk to others, to see others, to meet others, and so forth. So, looking at the way that we relate to others, we take some as our enemies, we hold some as our enemies, and some as our friends. And sometimes we view them with the great sense of difference, as if there's a great sense of difference between friends and enemies. And this mental tightness is related to that. Our mind becomes more tight, more narrow when we hold that great division, when we make that great division between friends and enemies.
That dinza round the shin be parallel in some to shoot chin and it and only kanji makiba the madibi game on which take your channel and it goes to charge. That run shin be nyamba said deva devata don't mendeva nyambas. So tell a jargon does. Tim Dichiki and Dranyami badi could ginzin chiki ton. Dranyami be some of the Kazuk Shucha of Titsugi Kuyang Dre Tiunguasares.
So we hold that great divide, great gap between us, between friends and enemies, or between ourselves and others. And when we make that great distinction, or when we have a big gap that is created between ourselves and others, it compounds our suffering, our mental tightness. So this meditation on the equality of oneself with others is recognizing that we're not different to others. Because through that gap that is created between ourselves and others, it might seem to us that we are different to others, or others are different to us. But with the equality of self with others, we recognize that this is not the case, that we're all alike in seeking happiness and wanting to avoid suffering.
Chinjung Suzulia, Jinzin Shu Chiong Bechik. Kaisantaku Labdradona, Cardona, Suzu Chikinsanamaya, Susu to Gambegala, Lanyagi, and Laving get Tilab, Janging get Tinito Jang, and Kanji, and Suzula Kesan Yonach, Suzula Pendo Yonach. Do see any Lab Jang drawn digi, any round the Shense, any Jandarin with shoot, sort the edge. Chidanga someone gave a Tomam Conway, in a thousand Cindy Namalaya, Lojong Chedan Tolaya, and yes, some sort of this Keva Yungus or some of those, and a magic. The inji the Yawashing over the Michiki, Kunzu Dagmaras, Kunzu Chunjun Kone, Nanchilla, Champagne, some bangers, lab, teaching only, Kondia would tell us. Nanzu Mezanamaya, what number of the student, so. Capsan Rayach, Lab John Ronnie, and that the Georgia Galaka Petus, the leaders last rangal. Thing it out as those.
There's an Salung Jundan that said in Nenga Lorbeam and Nenga de la Joyore.
Nenga cheaper doors. Pusto Chamacha said.
Salong, it's just, oh yeah. Satang Lung Ketchamaro, Salong.
Yeah, Salong said, yeah,
Salong, oh yeah, Salong. Net Salong, then it's on your reckons. Geshe also reckons that it might have to do also with one's own upbringing, in a sense that sometimes you're conditioned to think in a particular way from young age. So as you grow up as a child, for example, then either your teacher or your parent or one of your relatives will instruct you on the way that you should be thinking or behaving. Then you should be doing this, you should be doing that. This is the way to think about it, and so forth. So it might be that our own cultural upbringing or close surrounding is conditioning us to think in a particular way. Like, for example, to think first and foremost of ourselves and creating kind of this gap between ourselves and others. So if this is the way that you were brought up, this is the way that you were influenced from young age, it is likely that you'll develop a greater and greater habituation with that. Of course, we also have some imprints from previous life. We do have that, but at the same time, we also conditioned to think in a particular way by our surroundings. So Geshe kind of thinks about it as he had a while ago a conversation with someone, and he said that while he didn't understand everything, it seems that the implication of the person that was talking to him said that it seems that cultural background is different, because in our education system, for example, we are educated first and foremost. So we're being told to take care of ourselves, to think for ourselves, to take care of ourselves. So there is that nourishment of an individual identity in our upbringing. And we don't hear a lot about taking up this attitude that is beneficial for everyone or beneficial for oneself. Whereas, the person talking to Geshe says that it seems that in Tibetan culture from young age, those ideas of developing an altruistic intention, wanting to be of benefit to others, are instilled upon you from young age. So Geshe reckons that runs true to a certain degree, in that it rings true to a certain degree that you are conditioned to think in a different way, in a certain way, by your upbringing, by your close surrounding. Oh. Geshe said that he has a friend here on the Sunshine Coast. No, we don't have to mention names, but anyway, he has a young child, 7 years old, and one day at school he was playing with another boy, and while playing around, he hurt his shoulder, maybe broke it, and the other kid did not apologize, did not say sorry. So he found it really hurtful that the other kid did not say sorry. So he came back home, he was injured, and he said that he doesn't want to go to school anymore. And the main reason for that is that the other child did not apologize. So he found it really hurtful that they did not say sorry. Then Geshe has another acquaintance, a Tibetan family. So they have a 3-year-old child, and the child, of course, observes what the parents do. So the mother does quite a lot of recitation of the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum. Anyway, one day they were having this conversation, and the mother was kind of talking quite a lot. And at some point, the kid interrupted and said that, "Mom, it's time to shut it. Go back to reciting Om Mani Padme Hum." Anyway, it has to do with one's habits, right? So if you try to instill habits or to help someone to cultivate habits from young age, Geshe reckons that you stand a better chance of making them become habituated with positive things. Have you got more questions? But yeah, there was just second. There was a second question. Tonglen. Yeah. So, Noble, before we get to your question, there was the second question that Deshan asked with respect to then, how is it related to Tonglen? Yeah, difference to Tonglen meditation. So, equalizing and exchange. Sorry, equalizing self with others is, as Geshe explained it a few minutes ago, in recognizing how you're and others are the same in wanting happiness and not wanting to experience suffering. Now, with respect to exchanging self with others, which is the second part of this meditation, exchanging self with others is changing your position or your orientation. So you exchange your position or orientation in taking others' position, right? So you take others' position, and others' position now becomes yours.
Rada Jes Laundi, Dardan Shin, Jes Laundi, and Jala Georgia Nanshingi, Jea Mevas. Dardan Sheniga di Deva Devada, Dunga Mundeva, Nyabainza, and Sosu Deva Gugi, Dunga Gu Meza, and Dunga Choma, Mendibulo Shoes, Gigas. The Nanshingi Pasha Malay, Gigi, and some shitty Yungo does. That Dilevaina. 아니 소소가 동안 되고 매와 나지 파쇼메 동안 되고 요 말에 인생이 콜이야지 동한테나 지금 말에 삼비기 아니 상로 디요 바이나 다티 다지 냠지 야슈 드레샤스라.
So in exchanging self with others, it's not that we exchange two things. Like, for example, you go to the shop and you exchange one thing for another. So it's not that form of exchange. We look at our orientation, beginning with, first of all, what we think of when we equalize ourselves with others. So we think that we're just like others in wishing for happiness and not wanting to experience suffering. And when we do experience suffering, we react to that sometimes quite severely, giving rise to that state of mind that can not tolerate suffering. They think that this is absolutely not right for me to have that. This is not what I want to have. So it arises for us when we experience a certain suffering situation. So then we can then think that when others that have the same aspiration, they want to be happy, they do not want to experience suffering, when they experience unwanted situation, when they experience suffering, they react exactly in the same way, giving rise to the mind that does not wish for that at all. So then you change your orientation rather than thinking only of yourself. Then you think others are just like me. May they not experience that.
Teledeza Darje Nyamjilaya, Darje Nyambadi, never some dangus. Dini any Jevi some of the Ingles. The tone like injury Darje Nyambagi some Tanguyo Mares. In a Kuning Gawas can drogo mundas. The tone di Tandangan Lamachurun Golden Masonaji. Then Jizun Lama Tuji, Majur drove the Dungan Malu Tata Dala member. Dagi Degishan and Rogan Demachila said, Sound Taran, Donis Taran.
So that's one way of meditating on the exchange of self with others, right? Or it's one point from the meditation of exchanging self with others. Now, this meditation is based on, first off, equalizing self with others. So if you exchange self with others, first off, you need to begin with equalizing self with others. Now, you can also meditate on Tonglen. So to do a Tonglen meditation on giving and taking, you don't necessarily have to begin with equalizing self with others. If you do that, that's good. But the meditation manual, so to speak, or the technique, the procedure does not dictate that, first of all, you meditate on the equality of self with others. If you do want to practice equalizing, exchanging self with others, that procedure does begin with equalizing self with others and then the exchange of self with others. So you practice a Tonglen meditation, just like in the Guru Puja. One of the verses says, "And now, venerable kind Guru, please bless me so that I be able to, so that all sentient beings' negativities and suffering will ripen upon me, and may I invest all sentient beings in happiness and bliss."
kanga thakpo chebi kabdula ya samlu ta tangway na tende shukshe yigiris ra yongchogra da susu chik chaman jigu kada susu kanga susu na dimji kawla ya da dimji kawla ya tene chik ani lozi tembu tohne da samja tamji gi dunga di ani tangi gi nyong shok samsa da di tohne pe samja tamji gi dunga di ani tawa shok samsa dimji gi samdangway na yawu yunga saris ra ta chikla kawla ya ta dimji tawsi re da sara.
With giving and taking in Tonglen meditation, Geshe feels that it would be particularly potent to use that when you experience a certain unwanted situation, when you're sick, when you're in pain, when you're experiencing some difficult situation, particularly at that point in time. If you use a Tonglen meditation, it becomes very potent. If you use it when everything goes well for you, when you're totally at ease or relaxed, then this meditation can take you only up to a certain degree. It's different. It's less potent than when you use it at a time in which you do experience pain, suffering, and so forth. At that time, you can then think that I'm taking upon myself suffering of others and investing others in bliss and happiness. Nobu?
Thank you, Geshe, for letting me ask a question first and for having me here. The energy of the group is beautiful. I really appreciate the energy. The question I have, and it's still forming in my mind, but maybe it might be helpful to start. When we're doing shamatha meditation, I often say the right hand represents compassion and active giving, the left hand represents wisdom, reception, and receiving. And then I'm wondering, what is the combination of the two? Is it bodhicitta?
All right. So you're saying, I'm just repeating the recording for the people at home that might not have heard it. So in trying to formulate the question, you say that in practicing shamatha meditation, then you place one hand on the other. So it is said that the right one is symbolizes compassion or giving, then the other one, wisdom, receiving. So what is the way of combining the two? Is that the question?
Is that what is the combination of the two? Is that bodhicitta?
Okay, yeah, sorry. So it's the combination of the two is that bodhicitta. Dila shine gomtan shdoa. Ta khran shine gomtan di teoina ni laqba pamola jane dagan shagogir was. Ni khran yema kharekos na laqba di yabar.
Yebar.
I always get confused between right and left in Tibetan. I ask Geshe, is that the right one? Okay, so the right one, Yeba, shesanti kuran ninja tsungyores, ani lemba tsungyores, mare patangwa tsungyores, ani yemba seadi, sherab tsungyores, ani lemba tsungyores. Shesan 탑단 sherab, yaman ninja tan sherab, ni lemba tan tonwase di nyamdo jarwaina chanjogi sem chagiraves tunta diraves.
Tachidan ngege lagba yini de tabda sherab chungur sayagi kejato tirtangbo yins. Tachi pi lama sozogi wandu tachi sanga nyamlin chi wondi kari meba chewa ina ya che choya jire dos tinza tindi yon chogo ros ani karche na digi ros pena nganzu ani sanga nyamlin chi kala ya dojin tabda tribin sherab re sek ani meba che jos ta dindi doji baina ani cha ye la ya doji simdigi cha ye ba digi ani tab chungris yomi true simganza cha yoma digi sherab chungris lamna lab chogras so dindigi chundin gomchin ro ani tabjini ga so da labani yenza labani di tabjini ga mebachin tabjini ga chombachi gomna gom chogras.
Geshe said that he heard that today for the first time, that you can look at the way that you place your hands as representing, you can say, method and wisdom. So Geshe says that different teachers have different ways of explaining that, and often they draw from their own personal practice. So if they're practicing Tantra, for example, then they might apply different understanding of that is coming from their practice of Tantra, and different explanations are permissible. So Geshe feels that it is permissible to think of the two hands together, although Geshe hasn't had that explanation before. It is still permissible to think about it as method and wisdom. Like, for example, in a tantric practice, you would take Vajra to symbolize method, and the bell symbolizes wisdom. And also when you pick them up and you hold them in your hand, then the Vajra is held in the right hand, the bell is held in the left hand. So if you have method and wisdom, right and left, then also Geshe feels that in the same way, you can also say that the right hand is method, the left hand is wisdom.
Tilda, the Shini Jisongdendi, Jadan Shini Druялaya, Injiminigi, and it Tavjiniga, Songdango Yomaros, Penetrabale, the Shini Drugi Kandiros.
Now, Nobu, you said that when you began your question in saying that when you do a shamatha meditation. So shamatha meditation in general does not necessitate the combination of method and wisdom in this way. In that there are shamatha practitioners that are outside of the Buddhist tradition, in the sense that other traditions also practice shamatha. So it doesn't mean that they necessarily then combine method and wisdom, or the method and wisdom that we speak about.
Nanju Pambo Janin Jilia, Nanju Injimi, Nanjulia, Jambashu Chembo Majina, Nanju Tundikamas, Tinichi Tindikalia, Tuzutan, Kalekia, Kanji Kajima, which town language does. The Dindikalia, Shini Drubaina, Tangi Samser does, Kandadoch, Shinidi, Chidan Shinidi, and co Pigsujan Drubaina, Dao Trugnalia, Druguris Sungoris. The Shinigi Devati, Nanzu Namgi, Anichi Karsavata, Namgi Jigdembi Devajoras, Pena Lu Devachik. Tilly Pejangur Shinig Devati, Devachiandas. That digitally a charge in it, and Deva digitally a charge in Shinitavan and Nazaro Shinitavan, Deva the Koran charge in it. Any long coma drama to be Ninga Payers. The Cherub Mamu Shuji there is Devoras, and the D never zoned, Yanja Mania Kiedreda, and a chick Kasota, Koakia Drejimoto, Yadres Kimados. Till Ninji da Chanju Samda, Antonio Tobi, Piki Tomani Telia, Katsu Chiki, Sound Tawina, and Shiniti. Surely, and drew on a chick. Sung does. Pena Chansam Jolamba P. Tomanilaya, maybe Shenet Toba, the Jolam Toba Tiniums, Solom Kale, Shini Canada Chavan Sansan does.
So long comes another one. So then the practice of shamatha is found within the trainings in the three trainings. So as Buddhist practitioners, we take up the practice of the three trainings, and along those trainings, we also include the practice of shamatha. But then, as Geshe said, shamatha is not exclusively a Buddhist practice. There are also those who practice it outside of this tradition. So when we think of how we approach the practice of shamatha, it is said that when you attend shamatha, calm abiding in English, when you attend that, there is this special, distinguished bliss that you experience, physical and mental bliss. So we experience some form of pleasure or comfort as worldly beings. It is said that the one that you experience when you attain shamatha is manifold greater than that. It is that special, distinguished bliss that you experience when you attain shamatha. So then, suppose that you think about this distinguished special type of bliss, then you practice shamatha and you attain shamatha and you experience that bliss. It could act as something that holds you back and prevents you from developing higher paths, because you become so attached to that sensation of bliss and comfort, well-being that arises out of having that physical and mental bliss attributed to shamatha. So it can be an impediment for the development of a higher path. So then how can you approach that? Geshe reckons that if you take your priorities in your study, in your reflection, meditation, to focus on compassion, the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, these are going to be your priorities, then shamatha is going to be included within that. So in that sense, rather than focusing on that and making that to be the main priority, and then having the danger that you will become attached to the pleasure or to the bliss of calm abiding, when you base it on, first of all, the priorities of compassion, bodhicitta, and wisdom, then shamatha becomes incidental, and it helps you to avoid that attachment to that bliss. And it also, in some sense, you can say that it's also illustrated by the way that the progression along the steps of the path is explained. So there is a way of moving on from the path of accumulation to the path of preparation. Now, when you look at the explanation of the steps of progression, it is said that at some point when you move on from the path of accumulation to the path of preparation, you will have necessarily attained a certain type of calm abiding. So a clear indication of when is the exact point when that calm abiding or shamatha is attained is not clearly explained before that. It is said that when you get to that point, you will necessarily have done it. But when before that you do have to have it is not explained very clearly, which in Geshe's mind, you can say that in some sense it's indicative of what the priority is of developing shamatha along the steps of the path, since it is not emphasized from the point of view of saying that this is where you have to do it. Then you can get your head around what's the important aspects, of which aspects you should study, contemplate and meditate on now, and what will come later on. Should we leave it here for now? So we will leave it here for now. What Geshe thought of doing today was to speak of past and future lifetimes. In the previous session, he said that this is what he might speak about today, but we didn't get to talk about it because we have questions, and they were good questions, and Geshe feels that the discussion was good, which is something that we can include in the program from time to time. Before COVID-19, sounds like before COVID-19, sounds prehistoric, isn't it? So before COVID-19, where we had an active volunteer program here at the center, we had some of the bodies coming to the teachings, asking questions. We had discussions, but since that is not happening at the moment, we have less opportunities for doing Q&As or asking different questions and so forth. So we can do that from time to time in the future, because it does give us an opportunity to elucidate some aspects of the teachings that we don't normally look into. So that was very good, and we will do that again in the future. All right, let's do some dedication prayers. Sancho Rinpoche Make Panan Kyegyochi Kevan Nyamba Mepai Gone Gondo Bewa Shu Nyududa lama sangye drugyo ne dowa chikya malupa de salagupa sho. Sunju dupe lam steche sanzen kanchen tempo chana pe mo tenzin gyatsola sowa dev so shen drulun sho. Kowe shinkandi pendan dewa malo jongwe chenre siwan tenzin gyatsoy shape site padu tenguruchi chanshin jangung gyawe tenzin kyom pewe konzo do poten Choson kowe le mondo pada sodu kondo shakten shon.
Thank you.
Sorry?
I did it back to front.
It's okay. Ko korim de no shasa. Yeah, there's no fixed order to them. Each one of them has its own meaning. So it's
Right. Good. So how many people are online?
there were 5 on YouTube and 5 on Zoom. Yeah, because it's also live streamed on YouTube. So some people don't bother with the
How
Zoom.
many people are YouTube?
Oh, it says how many people are watching.
On YouTube? Well, on YouTube.
Yeah.
Or just on Zoom. You always see it on Zoom.
Yeah, but also YouTube tells you how many people are watching.
That's it. So you can see Zoom and YouTube separately?
Yeah.
Yeah. You sucked it all in, I think.
You were very lucky tonight.
No.